You have to wait a really long time to get a burger these days. Why is that? Well, as I recently discovered when I took my son to go get a burger at a local fast food place, the wait times are really long because there are not people to work fast food. I probably waited 30 or 45 minutes to get his burger and fries, but I'm a good dad, so I waited anyway. And a couple weeks later, I saw a Facebook post for our local community where people were complaining about various fast food places that also took a really long time to give you their food. And finally, a manager jumped in and said, well, first of all, I apologize, but I'm operating on about 1/4 or maybe it was 1/3 the staff that I'm supposed to. We just don't have employees. Nobody's working. And the people that we do have, most of them are brand new, so they don't know what they're doing. And immediately what commenced was a long debate about the coronavirus care packages and unemployment benefits. And a number of people said basically, this is the problem with young people today or people today. Nobody wants to work. They'd rather freeload off the government. Now, there's an aspect of those comments that I kind of resonated with, which is the implication that work itself is good. These people were shocked, were disgusted that people would not want to work. Why is that? Well, implied is the idea that work itself is good. It's good for you as a human being. It's ennobling in some sense. And I agree. I think work is really good. So why is it that people don't want to work these jobs? If they got $600 a week from the government for not working, or they got $600 a week and they got to work, why wouldn't they choose work if, in fact, it is good? And I think the obvious reason for that is that a lot of jobs today are not dignifying. They're not ennobling. What I mean by that is that they don't pursue the common good. There are a whole lot of jobs in our society that are not just hard, because there have always been hard jobs. Work is always hard in some sense. They're not just hard, but they're meaningless. And that's what I think gets to us. That when you go to some of these jobs, you put on a uniform and you sort of lose your identity. You become an avatar for this franchise. And people treat you that way. They don't treat you like a human being, or more importantly, they don't treat you like their neighbor, even if they really are your neighbor, right? They treat you as a representative of this franchise. You lose your individuality. And then on top of that, right, what is your work doing? How is it good for your community? How is it good for other people? Sometimes, in fact, very often, the food that you're providing is expensive, terrible for people's bodies, and bad for the environment, bad for God's creation. And if that's the kind of work you're doing day after day, we really should not be surprised when people say, I don't want to do this work. Like, maybe it's not laziness. Maybe it's just that they recognize that a lot of the jobs available to them are not for the good of their community. They're not meaningful jobs. And that strikes me not as selfishness or laziness, but as an implicit acknowledgement that we were designed to work for the good of others. Part of my book, You Are Not Your Own, Belonging to God in an Inhuman World, is exploring this question of anthropology. How did God design us? And the basic thesis of it is that we are not our own, but belong to God. And because we belong to God, we also have obligations to our family, to our churches, to our neighbors, and to creation. And if that's the case, then when we pursue work, when we go looking for jobs, we should be asking the question, is this honoring to God? Are the products or services we provide loving to our neighbors? Are they good for the customers? Are they good for creation? On the flip side, if we are our own and we belong to ourselves, if the fundamental reality about existence is that I am alone and I am responsible for making a meaningful, an exciting, and interesting life, a good story, then I really don't have to care about how my labor, how my work affects my neighbor. All that matters is that I'm getting ahead, that I'm telling a good story, that I feel meaningful, whether or not I'm actually doing something meaningful. So I see this tension in society. On the one hand, there is an acknowledgement, both by the people who are criticizing those who are unemployed, and I think by many of the people who are unemployed, there's this acknowledgement that work must have a higher purpose than economic gain. And what we could say is that there must be a higher purpose than efficiency, getting ahead, making the most money for the least work. There ought to be something. The problem is that many times we're unwilling to call that problem for what it is. We're unwilling to say it's not enough for jobs to produce wealth. It's not enough for you to have a job that pays your bills. Your work, as in all of your life, ought to be loving to God and your neighbor, because you don't belong to yourself, you belong to God. We're not willing to take that next step. So instead, we guilt young people, or we guilt people who don't want to hold jobs that are soul-sucking. And, the young people feel, or the unemployed people feel shamed if they don't work, and undignified if they do. But if we are not our own and we belong to God, then our labor matters. Our work matters. Our work matters not just, or not even primarily, because of what it does for us, but for how it honors God and how it loves others around us.